Hi friends, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Caitlin, an Oxford MBA and admissions consultant. Today's video is about the things that really surprised me during my time at Oxford. The things I never found in a brochure or info session, but that shaped my experience in a big way. Let's dive in. First up, academics. One thing that absolutely surprised me was how much the Oxford MBA used the Harvard-style case-based cold calling approach. In our classes, it was always this very live discussion where professors would call on students without warning. We had these massive name tags that allowed them to move from student to student very quickly. I'm American, and I studied in the United States to get my bachelor's degree, where I was used to listening to lectures and professors asking questions and people volunteering to answer, but they were never cold called. So at Oxford, I had to adapt to the Socratic method fast. It took me all of the first term, Michaelmas, to really get used to that high energy participatory learning format. But then by the second term, Hillary, I ended up really enjoying it. In fact, I still remember the first time I was cold called. It was in my class, Entrepreneurial Finance, and it was a professor who was a former Stanford GSB professor. And we were going through this case study that we had all prepared before class. Now, he came up to me and he was asking the question, would you rather invest in this $3 billion company or this $3.5 billion company? Honestly, I don't know where the answer came from within me, but I looked at him and I said, the $3 billion company. He asked a follow-up question, why? And I said, well, we're just looking at a snapshot of these companies. We haven't considered any other factors. He looked at me and he goes, super. And then he moved on to other students. So the reason why that was the correct answer was because in the exhibits, I remember reading that this company had developed some new technology that was starting to spike the revenue already. So that was just a small moment, but it was one I will always remember. Also, I was surprised by the level of independence that is expected in the UK academic system. So there's not a lot of hand-holding going on. You are expected to go out on your own and find the answers. And so I grew up in the United States where there's more of a guided approach to doing homework assignments. And so it was something that took a little bit of getting used to. Also, the grading is different, and it was a bit surprising in the beginning. At Oxford, most students will score between a 60 and a 70% on papers and exams. And if you score a 70 or above, that's considered a distinction. Now, if you do 70 to 74, that's similar to getting an A in the United States. If you do 75 up to 100, that's similar to getting an A+. And finally, the range of academic backgrounds was broader than I expected. We had doctors, lawyers, engineers, real estate investors, people in the government sector. And some of them would be qualitatively strong, some would be quantitatively strong. So since not everyone had prior training in business, they would find ways to challenge those that did by extending assignments or offering multiple tracks within the same class. Now, socially, one of the biggest surprises was I got to build deep relationships outside of the MBA program. They came from Oxford's college system and things like ballroom dancing. That's right, I was a member of the Oxford University Danceport Club and on their main team or varsity team. And I competed in a competition called the College Cuppers Ballroom Competition, in which each member of the varsity team had to recruit a member of their college that had never danced before to compete with us. against each other. So I recruited my flatmate who was a DPhil in mathematics, and he had never danced before, but we had a blast. And I think that math really helped him because he was able to stay on time, which is not always a common thing for beginners. And it was a nice reminder that the Oxford MBA is just a part of a bigger ecosystem. Another surprise was how globally oriented everyone's career goals were. So you might think that doing the MBA in the UK meant that most people planned to work in London or somewhere in Europe, but a lot of my classmates were aiming to work in Asia, the United States, or Africa. So the MBA in the UK really opened up international doors. And finally, Oxford's social scene was surprisingly inviting. I didn't experience much hierarchy. Of course, I encountered the stigmas that come from being American, but I became good friends with many British, French, Austrian, and Chinese students through dance or my college. So let's talk about lifestyle. Oxford's old buildings are gorgeous, but I'll be honest, for me, most of them were very cold. Also, I didn't realize that you had to manually flip a switch on your water heater so that your hot water would last longer. So before I knew that, I was taking 5-minute showers because it would instantly become freezing water. The other thing is that they have the heated towel racks, which aren't very common in the United States, and they're great, but you have to be careful because the bathrooms are much smaller than what you might be used to in the United States, and I would often accidentally brush the side of the towel rack when it was hot. Also, I had no idea how many libraries there were available for me to study in. While I was at Oxford, I studied in the Bodleian Old Library, the Radcliffe Camera, the Weston Library, Merton's Library, and the Sainsbury Library, which is in the Saïd Business School. I loved discovering new places to study. Culturally, the traditions were intense. Formal halls, sub-fusk, and inter-college competitions were some of the most common, but we also had bops, which were college parties, and there was the time ceremony at Merton College. The time ceremony is where Merton College students will walk backwards for 1 hour in the Fellows Quad in Merton College to ensure that the clocks successfully change from British summertime to Greenwich Mean Time. Now, the purpose of this is to create a localized area where natural time stands still. And the thinking is that this well of depressed natural time will allow natural time from surrounding areas to equalize civil time. Now, I didn't participate, but I remember hearing about it, and several of my fellow Mertonians were asking me if I was going to participate. And finally, there is always something to do at Oxford. Speakers, events, trips, socials. It led a lot of my MBA classmates to experience FOMO, the fear of missing out. But I always reminded myself that if I missed something, that it wasn't meant for me. And that mentality helped me to stay grounded and focused on what matters most. So those were the things that really surprised me about the Oxford MBA. If you're considering Oxford or any international MBA, I hope this gave you a more honest inside perspective. Let me know in the comments, did any of these surprise you about Oxford? Or what else are you still curious about? If you found this video helpful, then please give it a like and consider subscribing. I've got more real talk for you about MBA programs and admissions coming up soon. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.